Yeah, I mean, any modern TV show, all of the Marvel movies, every single one of them, any Marvel product whatsoever, the latest iPhone, um, cryptocurrency, right? These are all things that that people.
Things that are basically, you can tell they're bugmanized, if you will, because you hear about them for a little bit and then never hear about them ever again, right? Everyone always says this is going to be the next big
Yep.
thing, and then 6 months later,
Yep.
what is that, right? I'm gonna give you a list of those things just off the top of my head. Squid Games, Marvel, Pal
Oh
World.
yeah.
That's a big one. Pal World just
Yeah.
stop top of the Steam charts for
Power
one day,
World.
and then it's like, oh.
The Bugman is stuck in this constant circling, of just whatever the newest thing is, and they never really break out of it because they're not incentivized to. They're stuck in this hyper optimized capitalist system, which is keeping them compliant and happy and fat and lazy and all this other. So the question I had for you,
Mhm.
we're going to start using this term a lot. I can already tell, and even throughout this conversation, we've already used it a few times. What is a bug man? What do we mean by that?
Right, and I've got two answers. I've got sort of the TikTok answer, meaning I'll give it to you in 10 seconds or less, and then I'll give you more of a longer form. The 10 seconds or less answer is somebody who is waiting to buy the newest iPhone. So that doesn't mean that everybody that's waiting to buy the new iPhone is a bug man, but that means that almost every bug man is waiting to buy the new iPhone. And so basically, somebody who is dialed in or plugged in, rather, not dialed, plugged into the system and basically experiencing reality in the same lens that the hypermajority of the populace is experiencing it, and somebody who doesn't really think for themselves, but they want to be given thoughts. So this is your average, CNN 24-hour listener, your average Fox News 24-hour listener. This is your average, hey, I have the newest iPhone because I had to get it, right? I'm just going to throw in my iPhone 15, and then they're going to send me an iPhone 16 if I pay them $1,000 a year or whatever, right? And this is something where you think, you and me would think like, hey, what's going on with that? Why would you upgrade your phone? It's brand new. Like, you just bought it like a year ago. But as we talked about earlier, these things are meant to be upgraded because of how people have been conditioned to say, hey, I need a new phone every year. So that's how their business model works. But kicking it over to you with the
Right.
Bugman question, I think that I didn't do a full justice of a definition, but I gave an example of it. What would you do? What would your example be if you had to give an example?
So I'm going to go top down with it. So I'm going to weave a little bit, but I'll bring it back to give you a more concise definition. So the way I see it is this, right? And I'm going to relate it to my personal life. So growing up, I always felt a little bit alienated from the people around me, right?
Right.
Because they would do those kinds of things that you just said. They would be excited about the new iPhone release. They'd be excited about whatever popular artist was releasing an album on that particular day. They would follow celebrity news. They would consume sports, and like that would be their main hobby. And I was like, I enjoyed these things. I want to partake in, just to be social. I'm an extroverted person, so I like to be social. So I would partake in them too. But for me, it was always like, I have this one thing that I enjoy, and it's awesome. I'm just gonna kind of keep doing that. And like another example is like video games. Back when I used to play a lot of video games, there's people who are constantly playing the latest game, whatever it is. I don't know. Like they're just, you see them on Steam. They're always 10 people all playing the same game, and that game just came out like that day, right? And they're just kind of
Yep.
going from one node to the next. Things get released, and they get excited about it, and they spend the next month doing that, and then they drop it for the next thing. And this is, to me, this is what a bug man does. He just sort of consumes blindly because something in his wiring or in his conditioning has prevented him from becoming really, really interested in just one thing, which, or
Yes.
maybe just two or three things, which is really what you need to do in this world. I mean, this world is too big and too complex for you to be a master of all things. The reason, people say this, that the Renaissance man is dead, right? There's no more people who just,
Right.
like Leonardo da Vinci, was an expert in like 20 different things. Okay, well, becoming an expert in Leonardo da Vinci's time is a lot different than becoming an expert today in any particular field, because we simply have more
Hmm.
knowledge and more resources, and there's more time that has passed and more people have put their energy into it. So the threshold for expertise has been pushed higher and higher. And what that means is that you can spend your entire life on, if you want to spend your entire life on 10 different things, you're only ever going to become mediocre at it. Whereas if you focus hard on one or two things, that's where you're really going to see results and push yourself higher. So the bug man, I don't even think he's thinking on this level of I want to become an expert and become a Renaissance man. They're not really thinking that. But that just sort of illustrates what I'm saying, which is that the bugman is stuck in this constant circling, of just whatever the newest thing is, and they never really break out of it because they're not incentivized to. They're stuck in this hyper-optimized capitalist system, which is keeping them compliant and happy and fat and lazy and all this other stuff, right?
Right, and the bugman aspect of it that I view, kind of what you said, that layers back to what we were talking about earlier, is Leonardo da Vinci was able to become an expert of many and a jack of many, if you will, because his world was not over-optimized. There was low-hanging fruit for him to kind of pick and say, hey, this is easy, this is that, and this is the other thing. I'm not taking away from his genius, but I'm saying it's a lot harder to maneuver that landscape in today's world because things have already been over-optimized. So the bugman maybe feels like there's a little devoid in his heart saying, hey, I can't do anything perfect, so let me just do everything like everybody else. And kind of what you were thinking when you were mentioning all those things about how they're just doing the next thing, immediate things I started thinking of were these following things that are things that are basically, you can tell they're bugmanized, if you will, because you hear about them for a little bit and then you never hear about them ever again, right? Everyone always says this is going to be the next big thing, and then 6 months later, what is that, right? I'm gonna give you a list of those things just off the top of my head. Squid Games, Marvel, Pal World.
Oh, yeah.
That's a big one. Pal World just top of the Steam charts for one day, and then it's like, it's the next wave, right? And then things that are not like
Rivals.
that, where they were the wave. Yeah, Marvel Rivals, exactly. And then there's like definitely other stuff too. Black Friday as a concept, right? Like that's another chapter, and we'll get into it. But there are things that are contrapositive to that, where in my mind they are the wave, but they still endure. So they like actually kind of the bugmen, they fall out of it because they don't have the attention span to like get into something long term. So they pretend to kind of ride the wave of something that's in my mind a fake bugman product, which is genius. And I'm going to give you examples of that, and maybe you'll resonate, and maybe kick it back over to you and see what your thoughts are. But Breaking Bad, okay? I hate to say it, but Game of Thrones. I hate to say it.
Yeah.
As somebody that doesn't like that show, but you can argue about the ending. But the first 6 seasons was bugmanized, but it has the longevity, right? And MP3 players at the time, right? Everyone had one, et cetera, but then people started tinkering with them, and it became its own thing. And a lot of things are like that in my mind. They're the wave, et cetera, right? But then they become something that's still, because the product is actually good over time, people start to figure out, hey, what can I do with this actually? Like the non-bugmen, and I have this vitriolic reaction to something when the Pal Worlds of the world, right? I can't partake in that stuff because I have some personality flaw that doesn't allow me to say, hey, everyone else is doing this thing, so let me do it, which holds me back in some cases. But I do get to jump on things a little bit later to the party, and I see when people kind of leave the hype away, and I can see, let's optimize some of this, because already all of the over-optimization, quote unquote, has already been started by the bugmen, and they start to leave because their attention span is so low, so I can jump in and say, hey, let me figure out a little bit more about this, right? So back over to you. What is some example of something that's a bugman style thing that trended but then fell off in your mind, like the things I listed, Squid Games, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, any modern TV show, all of the Marvel movies, every single one of them, any Marvel product whatsoever, the latest iPhone, cryptocurrency, right? These are all things that that people. I mean, here's the thing: I'm not bashing crypto. I mean, get rich if you want, if that's how you're going to do it. Cool, but it's just another fad. Like, it's just another way to invest. This like people get excited about, and then they'll find something else.
Right.
You know,
ChatGPT,
I want to connect this to. I want to go even higher, right, in my top-down view, because I have a really good thought I want to get out. So, in the Christian world, you see this this yearning for the more traditional forms of worship. So, I'm not Catholic, but I can tell you from my experience and my research in the Catholic faith, there's two ways to do Mass. Okay, and Mass is the most important ritual in the Catholic faith. It's what they do every Sunday. There is what's called the Novus Ordo, which sometime in the middle of the 20th century, the Pope basically said that in order to attract new people to the faith, we need to make it more accessible. And so what he essentially did is he removed all the Latin. So Catholic Mass used to be done purely in Latin, okay? Which is obviously, I mean, if you're an English speaker, you go to a Latin Mass, you're going to be freaking lost. You're not really going to know what's going on. So the Pope said, hey, let's go ahead and make sure that Mass is being done in the vulgar language, which means in the language of wherever the church is at that particular time. So it's more accessible.
Right.
Okay, but then there were also other changes that were made to make it less traditional. So a lot of the specific steps of the ritual were sort of like hey, we'll leave this up to the priest in any particular parish to sort of do what they think is best. So we're going to eliminate some of these more traditional styles in order to try to attract new people because we feel the church needs to grow. So understandable impulse, right? I get the impulse completely. But what they've done is they've stripped the tradition, and this gets to what we're saying, because when the bugman, as we're conceptualizing him, is going from one thing to the next to the next. He never stays on anything long enough to really understand it. And when you don't spend long enough on one thing to understand it, you never really understand yourself. Okay, and so when you strip away the traditionalism from the Catholic Mass, you're erasing, whether you like it or not, you're erasing thousands of years of history and tradition that people no longer have access to. And that's the key thing here, is that all of this consumerism, bugman type mentality is stripping away something deeper. There's something that we have as a foundation of a society, or that we used to have, which kept us tethered to the past, and it helped us understand the steps that we had to take to get where we are today, and have an appreciation for that. Nowadays, people who think about the past think of people who live in the past as being like dumb, idiot savages, right? Which is so stupid, because they built the world that you and I live in. They came up with the traditions. They figured out these problems before we ever were alive. And so we have to look at them with respect. We have to understand why they had their traditions, why they had their practices, and try to either, maybe we modify them for whatever time we're living in here and there, but we have to understand why they were there and keep them moving forward. So this is the key issue, in my view, of what is the problem with all this? Why is this even an issue? Because it's stripping away that fundamental part of us.
What is up, guys? Thank you for checking out this clip from the Maneuver Life Radio podcast. If this content is up your alley, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and definitely drop a comment letting us know whether or not you agree or disagree with what was discussed in the clip. We do have full unedited discussions that we upload on Mondays. The link for this one will be in the description. Thanks for stopping by. Have a good rest of your day.